Good times are killing me. Hello. Welcome to the Daily Faded. I'm Hetz. This is where we get faded daily and talk about something like news or politics. Talk a little bit about the news of the day and then the news of the last couple of days. If you have something of your own to toke, please join me. Or if you have a glass of wine or whiskey to sip, please have a beer, whatever. Some milk. What is it about Kirkland brands that makes them so good? We've started buying soy milk at Costco, and it is so much better than the soy milk we normally get at Ralph's. That's all I'm saying. This is our 60th episode of the Daily Faded. Thank you for joining me. Who will lead defunding the police is what we're going to talk about today. First, our catch up on COVID-19. There are over 7.3 million cases confirmed worldwide, 413,627 deaths. In the US, we have a number that is not the right number. I believe we're over 2 million. God damn it. Hold on one second. 2,114,000. 2,114,000. We're over 2 million and we're over 114,000 deaths in the United States. And in California, we have 133,950 confirmed cases and 4,772 deaths. So, I wanted to read this before I gave the COVID numbers. So the Hill reports the Texas Department of State Health Services reported 1,935 COVID-19 patients currently admitted to state hospitals. That figure tops the previous record for coronavirus hospitalizations that had peaked at 1,888 patients on May 5th, according to CNBC. Reuters reports Arizona calls for emergency plan as COVID-19 spikes after reopening. So, again, this was not a result that I wanted, but this is what we predicted would happen. The science was pretty clear that reopening was going to lead to more cases, and that is starting to make itself more clear by the day, and I think it's going to continue with more and more states. So I just have this random Matt Taibbi quote because I'm reading Hate Inc. right now, which is really good, and I highly recommend it. He wrote, "The notion that you are reading the truth and not consuming a product is the first deception of commercial media." The notion that you are reading the truth and not consuming a product is the first deception of commercial media, because he talks about how all media is packaged and made for the demographic that it serves, made for the specific audience that it serves. He compares the media to professional wrestling, and it's an extremely powerful comparison that he makes. And I am also watching When They See Us by Ava DuVernay. I've just finished the first episode. I also just watched 13th on Netflix. Look, if you haven't seen 13th, watch 13th. If you haven't done anything to educate yourself about racism in America, watch 13th. if you only do one thing to educate yourself, no matter how liberal or progressive you think you are, no matter how much you think you understand the situation, watch 13th. It's a breathtaking film. It's a breathtaking film. Brilliant people explaining how we go from slavery to George Floyd and mass incarceration. It's an amazing film. I think every high school sophomore should watch it in social studies or history class or whatever. And you know, there was something else totally random today, which is I just want to read this to you. This is John Ehrlichman, counsel and assistant to U.S. President Nixon, and he's talking about Nixon signing the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. You may have heard this quote before, but I think it's one to remember. Quote, "You want to know what this was really all about? Nixon had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We know we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." Interviewed in 1992. So that is a chapter, a moment really, in the story of 13th. But it's yet another moment where the politicians choose disgusting white supremacy as the policy. You know, and they're quite specific about it. So in other news, Jackie Lacey announced assault charges against LAPD officer Frank Hernandez, who repeatedly punched an unarmed man. I may have smoked a little bit before the show. Forgive me. This all stems from a video circulating by the meme account at Foo's Gone Wild, which showed the beating. You know, DSA LA has been participating in cooperation with other social justice groups in marching against Jackie Lacey every Friday, I think at 3 p.m. every Friday. There are a large number of cops who have shot people who have not been arrested, not been tried, not been convicted under Jackie Lacey. So this would be her trying to get her ass out of the fire and back into the frying pan, I guess. I'm happy that they announced assault charges against this guy, but it's kind of too little too late for Jackie Lacey. So that said, God knows who she'll be running against. Could be one of those lesser of two evil votes. Have you seen the pictures of what's going on in Atlanta today? The voter suppression in Atlanta is at an all-time high today. The lines go down the street. People are waiting 7 or 8 hours to vote. It does not portend well for November. And it's because they know Georgia can go blue. With like full enfranchisement, Georgia could elect. They could elect Joe Biden in November. Several workers at the Tesla plant have tested positive for coronavirus. There are several outlets reporting on this. None of them had a number. And then just before we started the live stream, I saw CNN reporting 2 people at the Tesla plant have COVID-19. Well, if 2 people at the Tesla plant have COVID-19, that's not good. That's not good. Now, I believe they went back to work with a lot of safety precautions and PPE and stuff like that. So maybe that stuff will stop the spread of the virus. It's a 10,000 person plant. Maybe if you get 10,000 people, 2 of them are going to have COVID-19. Frankly, 10,000 people, I'm surprised more of them didn't have COVID-19. We'll see how that story develops. The Philadelphia Inquirer today reporting that Philadelphia's municipal sanitation workers, who are predominantly black, rallied Tuesday morning in John F. Kennedy Plaza for better personal protective equipment, hazard pay, and coronavirus testing. So that is good. Support that. Absolutely support that. And again, I support those things for everyone. Everyone who needs PPE should get PPE. It's a new cost of doing business. That's all there is to it. Sorry, capitalists, there's a new cost of doing business, and you're not taking it out of our salaries. So PPE, hazard pay, and coronavirus testing is the least you could do. The absolute least you could do. So, and that just goes across the board, the entire workforce. In other news, Elliot Engel in New York got into some trouble when asked if he was supporting well, I mentioned yesterday that Elliot Engel got caught saying on a hot mic that he only wants to speak because he has a primary coming up at a Black Lives Matter event. And he said it twice. He got caught saying it twice. So today they asked Schumer if he was supporting Elliot Engel. Quote, "I haven't endorsed in that race," Schumer told reporters. "I'm busy with Senate races." Ow! Burned by Chuck Schumer. Oh my God. Elliot Engel dissed by Chuck Schumer. I love to see it. I smell blood in the water. If you can do anything to support Jamal Bowman in New York, please do. Because taking down Elliot Engel would be like taking down Joe Crowley. And having Jamal Bowman in there will be like having another AOC in there. Only a completely different face and a completely different personality. But he is fantastic. I've seen him interviewed many times, and he's a true progressive. And boy, I'm busy with Senate races, Schumer says to them. Oh, Elliot Engel is so clueless. And then the thing about the nurses union, god damn, what a joke this guy is. And then we have something to celebrate today. This is super fucking important. This may be the biggest achievement. No, I'm being hyperbolic. But it's a big achievement. This is a big achievement. After 32 years on the air, Cops has been canceled by Viacom. They were set to debut their 33rd season starting on Monday, and Cops is gone. Down the tubes. No more Cops. I hope they pull it out of syndication. I hope that show goes into fucking dustbin of history. That show is reprehensible. It traces its roots right back to the war on crime in the Reagan era, and then H.W. Bush, and then the Clinton era. It's like a statue of Robert E. Lee. It needs to go in the toilet, and no one ever needs to look at it again. I mean, I don't know, keep one copy for the academics to study, but so there's a great article in the Intelligencer, which I like to read because it intelligenzizes me. Elliot Engel reminds everyone why he has a primary opponent. Since protests began last Friday, the New York City police have been caught repeatedly brutalizing members of the public. Engel's district has suffered severe looting. There is a pandemic, and somehow the congressman sounds bored. If he did not have a primary, where would he be? If not his district, perhaps his home in Tony, Potomac, Maryland, where he has claimed a tax break meant for permanent residents for 10 years. This guy is never in New York. As one might infer from Engel's tax filings, the moderate Democrat is a rare sight in his Bronx district. He's also facing his first major primary challenge in decades, with his absenteeism a major impetus for the contest. His hot mic moment comes one day after primary challenger Ondem Ghebreyesus dropped out of the race and endorsed fellow progressive Jamal Bowman, who was recruited by Justice Democrats last year. The same day, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee announced its endorsement of Bowman. The group had endorsed Senator Elizabeth Warren for president before she dropped out of the race. So Jamal Bowman is uniting the Bernie faction and the Warren faction. I like that. Get as much power behind this guy as we can. Bowman, a former middle school principal, has actively supported recent protests. As a working-class black male educator during the entirety of Bloomberg's tenure, I got to experience the horrors and the trauma of how his police department treated people like me, he wrote in a recent editorial for NBCNews.com. In one incident, he said the NYPD arrested him on suspicion of stealing his own car. In the other, he said he was pulled over, arrested, and held for several hours after he failed to properly use his turn signal. Engel has a major fundraising advantage over Bowman, as the New York Times reported on Tuesday. But money isn't everything, even in politics. With the primary field consolidating behind Bowman ahead of the June 23rd vote, Engel might wish to project more concern for his district. As matters stand, he closely resembles a fallen comrade, Joe Crowley, who lost a primary race to AOC in 2018. Crowley was a powerful Democrat, a skilled fundraiser, and like Engel, a relatively absent representative, until he wasn't. So June 23rd in New York, going to be a big night. Big night. Big night. Have I mentioned lately that Steve King lost his primary? Oh, good. I love it when the races go down. No, but this Engel Bowman primary is a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I wish Jamal Bowman all the luck in the world. I think he's terrific. I think he's a great candidate. And I have a feeling about this one. It just feels so much like AOC. But was AOC lightning in a bottle? I don't know. So I actually want to go through some stuff that I wanted to talk about yesterday, which is what are these first baby steps that are being taken here and around the country towards defunding the police or reimagining public safety. We're going to start with the LAist, and I made these notes yesterday, and they had an article, Defund the Police, What to Expect from Today's City Council Budget Committee Meeting by Libby Dankman. And the first note that I made in all caps, like a deranged Trump tweet, was not going to make any decisions. This is nothing but a meeting. So, yes, it's a good first step. because you got to have some kind of first step. But what are they really going to do or talk about or commit to? Nothing real, I don't think. I went back to the LAist to see what the follow-up was from the meeting, and I couldn't find any reporting on what actually transpired in the meeting. The operating budget of the LAPD is over $1.8 billion, mostly salaries. The city's total spending on police tops $3.1 billion when items like pensions and HR benefits are included. Activists led by Black Lives Matter LA have decried city leaders committing nearly 54% of discretionary spending to law enforcement, and defund the police has become a rallying cry at marches around LA. The effort to shift city resources away from the LAPD was happening in Los Angeles well before a Minneapolis police officer killed Floyd, igniting nationwide demonstrations. A coalition of groups led by BLM LA introduced a people's budget proposal, which the DSA supported last month, that leaves law enforcement and police with just 5.7% of city spending. Under the plan, the bulk of taxpayer money would instead go to universal aid and crisis management, the built environment, and reimagined community safety, including crisis management, domestic violence intervention, and gang prevention programs. Since its introduction in April, Mayor Garcetti's budget drew outrage from community groups upset that the plan included cuts for most departments and partial furloughs for thousands of city workers, but kept a 7% budget increase for the LAPD intact. On Wednesday, the mayor announced he was on board with the city council's plan to reduce spending on police and would include the cuts in a package, slashing $250 million overall, money to be redirected to LA's Black community. Well, it's good that the number keeps going up with Garcetti. That's a start, because at first it was 100 to 150, then it was 150, and now he's saying 250. Studies have shown that gang intervention programs work better than gang tactical units in police departments. Is this like a boomer thing that I'm too low in the frame? Is that better? I don't know. Did that just make a difference in the quality of the show? I have no idea. And, you know, we've had terrible problems with gang task forces in LA, most notoriously the Rampart Division in the 90s, which was a gang unto itself. And there are gangs in the LA Sheriff's Department. They have a terrible problem with sheriff gangs. It's a real thing. At some point, I'll have to do some real reporting on it. Youth programs, a better social safety net, community centers and services, a higher minimum wage. Let's start talking about $25 an hour, because by the time we get this thing through, it's going to have to be that. Domestic violence intervention and mental health services to replace two of the main things cops deal with, which are abusers and the mentally ill, who definitely should not be in the same sentence together, by the way. Abusers and the mentally ill, they have nothing to do with one another. We must also lower the Black maternal fatality rate. But as we talk about these things, access to healthcare and education are also wildly important, you know, and environmental justice. If you're Black or brown or poor, you're much more likely to live near bad industrial pollution or toxic waste. This is a documented fact, and we have to really look at it. So all of these inequities, they all build up together, you know. And frankly, I think some people lost their jobs and had some time at home and looked around and said, what the fuck are we doing? And then when George Floyd happened, there was a lot of pent-up outrage, you know, over obviously police violence and systemic racism and white supremacy, but also just over the general malaise that we're all experiencing in the country. So police reforms are good. police dismantling or overhaul is better. We must address every symptom of oppression felt by African Americans and people of color. The article continues, it was a break with the orthodoxy of previous city leaders who, for decades, promised to grow the police department. But last week, it appeared a combination of overwhelming pressure from daily protests and the coronavirus pandemic squeezing financial resources forced new thinking. It's important that all our departments give something, if you will, and the police should be no different, Price said. Meanwhile, protest organizers say slicing $150 million from the police budget isn't close to enough. Their ultimate goal is to abolish law enforcement and reimagine community safety with a focus on mental health care, housing, and other social services. Activists are on guard for what they see as official half measures from city leaders, meant to diffuse public outrage and curtail mass demonstrations against police violence. I mean, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Greta Thunberg. When she goes to Davos and scolds the World Economic Forum or whatever the fuck it's called, and she tells them, you're not doing anything. What we want is we want you to do something, and just messing around with cap and trade or whatever idea you're proposing, that's not going to do it. We need to keep all the fossil fuels in the ground. We need to have equity in our criminal justice system. We have to have equity in our society. The average American household, the average white American household, or I'm sorry, I think the median American household makes has $170,000 in wealth. Has $170,000 in wealth. And the median black family in America has $17,000 in wealth. And wealth is generational. We know it. We've seen it. Over 60% of all the billionaires' money is inherited. Now, in almost every city in America, the police union is going to stand in the way of this kind of thing. Their leadership has been publicly deriding Eric Garcetti for days, but Garcetti hasn't proposed a radical idea yet. Cutting $150 million or $250 million from a $3.1 billion budget is really inconsequential. I mean, it's like what you might cut because of the COVID-19 economic downturn. But of course, they weren't going to cut anything from LAPD. They were going to give LAPD more money. 54% of LA's budget goes to the cops. We are living in a police state. Most of the money for our city goes to the cops. That's our tax money. A state where the cops are the most important thing in civil society, and they have endless rights to kill and viciously attack people, from unarmed black people to unarmed protesters. So I'm going to go out with LA co-founder Melina Abdullah, who said, as we speak, they are trying to exploit this moment and turn it from a moment of transformation into a moment of reform. They're trying to say, oh, we want to do things that make policing better. She added, let me be clear. Policing evolves from slave catching. You cannot reform policing that evolved from slave catching. You have to abolish it. And this is why I ask you to please see 13th, to see the story of how where we are at today evolved from slavery. So that's what's happening in LA. It's not very, I can't be super optimistic about it. I've had a lot of good things to say about Garcetti during the pandemic, but I think he should have fired the police chief by now. And I'm not sure he's got what it takes for this moment. Like, this won't mean anything to a lot of you, but I ask myself what like Bill Bradley would do in this moment, and I feel like we'd get amazing change if Bill Bradley was the mayor. Now maybe I'm just romanticizing him because he was the mayor when I first came to LA 30 years ago. But and I just loved him. I thought he was awesome. So we'll see. We'll see how the story develops. I had gotten to a point where I really wanted to like Eric Garcetti, and it remains to be seen whether or not that will be the case. This is from The Appeal. Minneapolis City Council members announce intent to disband the police department. Disband the police department. Invest in proven community-led public safety. The move follows the police killing of George Floyd and more than a week of uprisings where hundreds of thousands of people around the world have protested against police violence and abusive police responses to the protests. Remember, these are uprisings. They are protests and they are uprisings. They're not riots. On Sunday afternoon, a veto-proof majority of Minneapolis City Council members announced their commitment to disbanding the city's embattled police department, which has endured relentless criticism in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, on May 25th. We're here because we hear you. We are here today because George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis police. We are here because here in Minneapolis and in cities across the United States, it is clear that our existing system of policing and public safety is not keeping our communities safe. Minneapolis City Council President Lisa Bender said Sunday, our efforts at incremental reform have failed, period. The City Council's decision follows those of several other high-profile partners, including Minneapolis Public Schools and the University of Minnesota and the Minneapolis Parks and Recreation, to sever long-standing ties with the MPD, the Minneapolis Police Department. This is amazing. The fact that all of those organizations have cut ties with the MPD, getting the MPD out of the public schools, is a fantastic thing. It's a fantastic thing. This is a city that is making a first step for real. The announcement today also arrives after several members of the council have expressed a complete loss of confidence in the Minneapolis Police Department. We are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, tweeted council member Jeremiah Ellison on June 4th, pledging to dramatically rethink the city's approach to emergency response. In a Time op-ed published the next day, council member Steve Fletcher cited the MPD's lengthy track record of misconduct and decades-long history of violence and discrimination, all of which are subjects of an ongoing Minnesota Department of Human Rights investigation as compelling justifications for the department's disbandment. We can resolve confusion over a $20 grocery transaction without drawing a weapon or pulling out handcuffs, Fletcher wrote. Well said. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said last night that he opposed disbanding the police department at a protest organized and led by Black Visions Collective against police violence in the city. That answer earned him a thundering chorus of boos and chants of shame and "Go home, Jacob, go home." The New York Times called the scene a humiliation on a scale almost unimaginable outside of cinema or nightmare. Look, Jacob Frey, or Fry, however you say his name, seemed to be saying some of the right words at first, but he pushed this whole idea of outside agitators, which turned out to be complete bullshit. He's tried to co-opt the, I don't know if he's actually taken a knee or not, but he's tried to co-opt the stance of taking a knee with the protesters. But does he get it? Does he get what people are talking about? Does he get what we need to do? It doesn't sound like it to me. I don't know. He really stepped in it. This part is really important. For years, activists have argued that MPD has failed to actually keep the city safe. And city council members echoed that sentiment today during their announcement. MPD's record for solving serious crimes in the city is consistently low. For example, in 2019, Minneapolis police only cleared 56% of cases in which a person was killed. Fuck the police! Yeah, that's a cop chopper. For example, in 2019, the Minneapolis police only cleared 56% of cases in which a person was killed. For rapes, the police department's solve rate is abysmally low. In 2016, their clearance rate for rape was just 22%. In other words, 4 out of every 5 rapes go unsolved in Minneapolis. Further casting doubt on the department's commitment to solving sexual assaults, MPD announced last year the discovery of 1,700 untested rape kits spanning 30 years, which officials said had been misplaced. So this place is a joke. It's a complete joke. The council's move is consistent with rapidly shifting public opinion regarding the urgency of overhauling the American model of law enforcement. Since Floyd's killing and the protests that ensued, officials in Los Angeles and New York City have called for making deep cuts. We were just talking about that, to swollen police budgets. Law enforcement officers are not equipped to be experts in responding to mental health crises, often leading to tragic results. Nationally, about half of police killings involve someone living with mental illness or disability. They're killing the mentally ill and the disabled. For Christ's sake, we have to do something about this. As a result, public health experts have long advocated for dispatching medical professionals and or social workers, not armed police, to respond to calls related to substance use and mental health. Polling from Data for Progress indicates that more than 2/3 of voters, 68%, support the creation of such programs, versions of which are already in place in other cities such as Eugene, Oregon, Austin, Texas, and Denver, Colorado. So those success rates for the Minneapolis Police Department are pathetic. They're really pathetic. So look, what is going on in Minneapolis with the city council? The fact that they're actually going to listen, and maybe they'll make some radical changes. Maybe they'll actually adopt some of the changes that we're asking for, that they are asking for, that people are asking for. That we should all be demanding, oh God. So I have one other thing. I almost forgot. I want the whole world to know that I am only 1 degree of separation away from Martin Gugino, who was attacked by police officers in Buffalo the other day. Today, Donald Trump tweeted. I don't like to read Donald Trump tweets, but this one is particularly upsetting. Buffalo protesters shoved by police could be an Antifa provocateur. 75-year-old Martin Gugino was pushed away after appearing to scan police communications in order to block out the equipment. At OANN. I watched. He fell harder than was pushed. Was aiming scanner. Could be a setup. And this has 166,000 likes and 42,000 retweets. My closest friends know Martin Gugino, and I've known him, I think, for like 20 years. And he's a longtime anti-war activist, a longtime free speech activist. I know he won at least one lawsuit over a free speech issue. And, he's exactly the kind of long-term activist who's going to be out there marching with Black Lives Matter. But the notion that he's Antifa, I mean, obviously it's ridiculous. It's something that Trump is tweeting, so it is by definition ridiculous. But it's just so funny. So uh, I'll let you know if I can get any inside information on how he's doing. Maybe I can have him as a guest on the show. Anyway, I'm just kidding because I don't know how to do that yet. Anyway, thank you guys for being with me tonight. This is the Daily Faded. I'm Hetz. Please hit like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit notifications. And join me again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Pacific, 11 o'clock Eastern. Peace out.